One of the things I've loved most about my life in kiting is all the places it's taken me, the doors it's opened, and the possibilities it's created. Projects and places I never would have been involved in or gone. People I've met, interesting places and things that you wouldn't otherwise see. Today, we're catching up with someone who has probably taken advantage of that more than anyone I know. It's taken him to Broadway and the Super Bowl, the Olympics, and even space. This is Skyrider Limited. I am Jesse. Today on the Pilots Meeting, we're catching up with Carl Robertshaw. So we're back again for another episode of the Pilots Meeting, and I am joined by Carl Robertshaw. Carl, you and I have known each other now for, we're just going to say a while, so as not to. It's been a while.
Yeah. Good to
It's
see you
always
again,
good to
Jesse.
see you,
It's
Carl.
always good to see you, Carl.
So, obviously, you and I met while you were competing in sport kites. I suppose that brings us to the obligatory first question. How did you get into kites? How did kites find you? However you'd like to say that.
Sure. It's kind of something that's always been in my life. I think my dad was into things that flew, made model aircraft in balsa wood and plastic, and we flew kites together, and obviously with my mum as well, and we'd always have a kite with us on holiday, and wherever we travelled, and we did travel around a lot with my dad's job when we were very little. And yeah, it was always a sort of escape in a way. And then in my teenage years got given I was offered a sewing machine that didn't work. And being that person that loves to know how things work, figured out how to get it to work, made a pair of trousers, made a lampshade, made a kite that worked, made another one, and that snowballed. Like, with a lot of people, it's very accessible, very easy thing to get into. So low barriers of entry kind of stuff. And yeah, is that in the heyday when the American sport kite scene was blossoming, and you had magazines like SKQ and Kite Life and so on, that were really singing the kind of praises, really sort of, exciting new times as it were for kites, because this was all new for everybody. And it seemed to be happening in America really well. And, people like High Performance, the team who were sort of, if you like, second generation coming up, challenging the kind of top of the line team and Roaring Flamingos and all of those sort of early teams that established team flying in sport kites as a thing in the mid-late 80s to the early 90s. It was sort of a romantic era, and this is when fabrics were becoming, high-tech fabrics were coming in. Things like windsurfing was becoming really sort of the new thing as well. So it's it was an exciting time in that sort of early 90s. And it's easy to get fabric then as well from the kite store in Covent Garden near where my dad lived. And bought some fabric, and that's it. Made loads of stuff, and I've always been somebody who makes things and designs
I don't know if
things.
people realize how early on you were designing. There's a number of sort of in the early flexi foil delta wing stuff, and it's at least one of your patterns, and there was a book of kites, kite plans. I think there's a sport kite of yours out there, with kind of a wingleted, sort of matrixy looking thing.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. There was a kite called a Raven in the back of Kite Lines in the review, and I made one copying it from a photograph, and it worked really well. So it's kind of based on that. So it's not based off any measurements or anything. It's it's my interpretation of a photograph back in the day.
I actually, and I think we'll talk about this later, because I know you have another hobby as well. You copying things from photographs kind of tracks really with your model making as well.
Well, it comes from my mum was a fine art painter and taught foundation course in A-level art, and uh, I would often go with a friend of the family, but somebody who she taught, Ian, and he would teach the life drawing at the local art college in the evening. So I would go with him. So I was life drawing from the age of 14. So it's always that thing about observation, and it's about looking, more looking than it is doing. And,
Sure.
it's either making something figurative or it's interpretive kind of thing. So that's always been if you like, part of how I see as well. You're kind of, seeing the world, and then, as part of the kind of how you recreate it and stuff. So yeah, there's that, kind of, it's all about observation really, so it's not copying what you think you see, it's literally copying what you do see. So that's a difference.
So building and tinkering, and obviously you and your brother James end up competing in sport kites. So first team was aircraft, and then as a pair as Evolver.
My first team was Team Buzz in Australia.
Hang on, elaborate more details.
So with college, went to art college, did graphic design, got a scholarship, exchange course to go to Australia. And of course, being in Australia, I didn't go to college for the 6 months I was there. I went and flew kites. And with Jeff Arundel, who used to run the kite store in, what's the kite shop called? Anyway, so it was him and another guy, and the three of us, we formed a team, and it was very sort of, rudimentary team for about a month kind of thing, but we competed in the nationals in Australia. And, we were okay, nothing to write home about, literally. But I won the nationals there as well. So I won precision and came third in ballet, I think.
Oh my God, of course you did.
And anyway, but that was the first team, and I learned a lot from that. And with that trip, went out and did the Hawaii Challenge in Honolulu with Robert Luera, ran that, and he taught me one of the best bits of advice, which was never get cocky. So I still live by that. And, you might be good at something, but don't get arrogant about it. And, I'm just keen to learn all the time. And he taught me how to fly four-line, like properly fly four-line. And then, his shot was brilliant. Stayed with him and Barbara for a week after the festival. And then on the way back from this trip to Australia, swung by San Diego, as you do. And I'd, in Australia, I'd made enough kites to earn some pocket money to get a flight over to Japan. Stayed with a friend from college back in London, in Japan, near where the World Championships were being held. Her grandmother's flat was near there, so we slept on tatami mats and all of that. Very good. And made friends with I was already friends with the high performance, like dropping names here, but with Ron Rich and, top of the line, sort of made contact with them, real gods of the kiting world. And then on this trip back from Australia, went to San Diego, went to their practice ground and sat there at the age of 19, kind of just like this kid, just in awe of just seeing this team of four do these routines that I'd never seen on Great Lakes videos and so on. And I got to press the tape. So I got, audience of one, I got to see the Battle Hymn of the Republic and, all of those things. And then during the lunchtime, they were all sitting down and I asked if I could fly with them. Like, I just asked Ron if I could fly with you. And he got up and I was like, can I fly with the team? So he asked Paul to stand out, and then I had Pam Kirk on one side and Ron Rich on the other. And, he'd take us through a maneuver and I observe it really carefully, but get it slightly wrong. And then the next time I was determined to get it right. And I was, my spacing was on point and Pam was giggling away, kind of like, who is this kid from, Britain who's who's kind of got himself along here. It's kind of a bit, sort of obsessive, but I learned a lot from that and came back and formed the team, helped form the team aircraft with, Nick, Jeremy and Art at the time. So yeah.
And you guys flew top line initially. You guys were flying top of the line initially, and then
Well, I brought back, because, you know, having spent time in San Diego, went to Top of the Line, got a few second skins. I'd made my own kite, my own version, my own copies of them as well, but, with rods that I'd accumulated on my trip. So I had a few, so we flew those, and then we made ultralights ourselves, and then we had the second skins which were converted, and then we won the first two competitions, and then what's his name, Dom Smith, who was a contact, really nice guy at Top of the Line. He was like, okay, boys, we'll send you some. So then we got some proper skins, and I think it was Latuke, and he sent over the VIPs, the vented version that Top of the Line Flight Squadron flew in World Cup in Australia, in Japan. So we got to fly their actual kites on the beach in France, and it was like a dream come true. They purred along, they were set beautifully. It's like, talk about a lesson, literally stepping into somebody else's shoes. It was incredible. It was like, okay, now we know how to set up our kites for forevermore.
Right.
Kind of thing. Right. So, yeah, it was a good learning curve, and we worked very hard, practicing 40 hours a week.
Oh, and it paid off, because you guys won quite a lot over the years. And
we won everything up until the World Cup, and then at World Cup in San Francisco, Berkeley, we came second. So we got high performance rattled, and the best line from that, when Daniel Prentice, for Cartlines magazine, was interviewing us as we were about to go in, and he asked two things, and he said, he asked us, are we nervous? And Jeremy said, no, English. That sharp sense of humour, but also he commented on our black socks. We're all wearing matching black socks. Like we were taking this really seriously. And we were there to, we meant business, basically.
So that carried you along to, you guys flew flexifoils and stuff, the Matrix, and then ultimately you bring your first commercial model of your own and your own label.
Yep. So fast tracking onwards, Flexifoil wanted to sponsor us. It's after a few approaches from other companies, but we went with Flexifoil. We had a really good relationship with them for 1 year, and then we disbanded after that. But that was with Andy Preston, of course, who was designing Level 7, and the Matrix was the offshoot of that project. So it was a great team kite. And
wait a minute.
Yeah.
The Stranger Level 7, the Matrix is an offshoot of the Level 7?
Yeah, did you not know that?
No. I'm not sure many people. How is those related?
Do I know something you don't?
Well,
this is good.
I mean, I'm sure several things, but hang on.
So Andy was off in the world of, Level 7, whatever it's going to be called, this kind of weird, sort of 3D flying
Weird
kite.
It is.
And through the prototypes and through the work, out came a team kite, strangely. So, it's funny how these kind of offshoots are born. But this team kite was born, and that's, it's got a 3D sail. That's all.
Sure, there is a lot of shape to it.
There is a lot of shape to it.
Yeah, so it's where there's a lot. This is where the advances come as well, with kind of happy accidents and so on. So the Matrix was the a genuine other kite, which was a kind of cousin, if you like, or born out of the same litter, if you like. Kind of
that's wild
of the Level 7. Wild. So we did that, and they were brilliant, and always have been, and then that started the relationship with Flexifoil. So I designed the Pulse Atom, Orbit, and Pulsar, the small beginners kites, and then went on to do the Fury, which was a sort of thing from a beginner's kite, large sort of whipstop thing. I always remember the Griffin. Remember the Griffin, which was a Martin Lester made it over here, and I can't remember who made it in the States. But it was a very is an entry-level price. It was an 8-foot or 2.5-meter kite, and very affordable, flew really well, tracked really well, good team kite, all those
Funny how those
ingredients
two
that,
seem to overlap, beginner and team kite.
well, it kind of, as Yasu says, it's kind of a good team kite is a good beginner's kite, because you need to be able to fly it without looking at it. So it's got to have all the right feedback and have a good wind window, it's all the rest of it. Good speed control. So yeah, it's kind of in that world, but obviously based on things like the sizzle and the matrix, and there's a lot of and the North Shore. There's a lot of ingredients that go into what the Fury still is, kind of thing. So it's been going since '94. So it's no 2004. Sorry, it's got
22 years.
It's got legs. Yeah. And it's very adaptable. So it's that thing of, like you can frame it in 6mm, you can
Minor and
make it in
nitros.
ripstop. Yeah, and you can do it in Icarex, and there's a whole range to suit all the winds, and it's very adaptable. So it will suit a lot of different people's flying styles and different team styles as well. So yeah, there's always a kind of foundation kite to be able to make it your own.
And all along during this, you've always sort of also done the art kite and installation stuff.
Yeah, I've always made structures with fabric. So using fabric as a structure, and that's, like the kites, it's the same principle, applying the kite thinking, but outside, not to like kites specifically, but structures. So how do you make things lighter? And, there's sort of been this kind of unplanned journey, but for 30 plus years, it's become a career in the live events world of designing and making structures and designs that are lightweight, and it would be considered super lightweight, very ultralight kind of thing. To us in the kite world, it's just light. It's just what we do. But then when, you're talking about a set, which is the whole thing weighs 140 kilos, like for an Only in the Johnsons, for instance, and that goes in the back of a small van, whereas the same, like when we unloaded when we were loading up at the end of the show in the Royal Opera House in London, the Bolshoi were loading in with like 3 or 4 articulated lorries with just tons of equipment for the same space. That's the kind of difference. So lighting designers, directors, other designers as well, kind of event organizers, production managers love this kind of stuff because it's it's smaller to pack down, it's lighter to travel, it's lighter to hang. You don't need so much regulations in terms of weight loads and stuff. It's very adaptable. It's very easy to fix. All of that thing, again, very entry level. It's less specialized, and it lights really beautifully because, of course, kites are designed to be outside in the sunlight. And that's the whole thing. You're playing with light and volume in the same way.
So I guess there's a good spot. So can you talk about some of the live events you've done? Because I know it's a pretty substantial list of venues.
Yeah, been around the world a few times with this. A lot of opera houses around the world. So from Rome to Paris to Oslo, Melbourne, New York, Radio City Music Hall, to the Armory in New York, like the Marquis Theatre at the moment on Broadway, which we've got Stranger Things happening at the moment.
That's been going now for about a year.
Yeah, and then stadium shows as well, from the Commonwealth Games to the Olympics to things like the Super Bowl as well. So, and also small theatres as well. So for like the Park Theatre here in London, which seats 90.
Oh wow!
So
really
so it's from the tiny to the really big. The Super Bowl's got, I think, the biggest live audience.
Probably pretty close. I know the
Is it the
rule
biggest live
now
audience for music?
to be a host stadium is like, I think 75,000 seats.
I think in terms of broadcast, I think it's the
Oh,
biggest
I would
audience for a music
I
show
would
in the
think.
world, I think. So go, do all of that, as it were. So get, very at home, being in a black room for a week, wearing black in the darkness, sewing with black thread with no light. It's kind of
One of my
that kind of.
memories that will never fade of the project we worked together, the Hatchling, is blacking out Flying Line.
Yeah, of course, so you don't see it, and that's the thing. It's like, for work, you're always all wearing black. Everything's always in the darkness. If you're on stage and you know, you're in something lighter, but for everybody else, everybody's kind of hiding in the
Right.
darkness somehow. So, yeah, the Hatchling was another project, which was the elevated idea of kiting and the elevated idea of puppetry.
Still the largest flying
Working with,
puppet in the world.
yeah, and quite an audacious project. And we first did it in Plymouth in the UK, in relation to the Mayflower and Plymouth, Massachusetts, the anniversary of that. And yeah, the design is large. It's got a 65-foot wingspan, so
Yeah, we were
21
working it
meter
out.
wingspan.
We were working it out at dinner there. Didn't we decide she's about the same size as an F-14 with its wings open or something like that? Yeah,
Probably, yeah. It's the size of, two microlights would fit
yeah,
under its
yeah.
wings.
She's huge. Um,
Yeah.
that's staggering the first time you walk into a room with it, and see it all picked up by the puppeteers, and it's a couple stories tall, and
And the whole thing weighs 50 kilos. I don't know what that is in pounds, but it's two
yeah,
luggage
not
bags when you're
much.
on a plane.
150 pounds thereabouts. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. So yeah, it's got 700 meters of carbon in it.
Oh my god. I will. The poor puppet tech just anytime. I mean, she didn't break a lot, but when she did, and splicing in the new carbon.
She was fixing a lot. The puppeteers and the kiters were breaking.
No, I meant the dragon. She didn't break a lot, but our
Yeah.
poor puppet tech was
No. Yeah.
epoxying things back in.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. It's always the way.
But
Yeah. But it's like at a kite festival,
well,
like you break something and then you're fixing it. So yeah,
at least the team kites, the fittings are taped on, though.
this is the thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And the spars are not tapered, preferably
right,
so that you can turn them round and use the good end.
right. So yeah, live events. You have objects in space.
So I worked with Oxford Space Systems since before lockdown, and of course lockdown happened, COVID happened, the event industry just went, the bottom fell out, and I was available, and they were like, right, okay, we've got this project, and we were working on 5 projects together. So one of them has ended up being live. So there's 5 satellites in space that I've made, and they continue to build them, and they're going up there. So they're low frequency antenna that are only about a foot long, but yeah, made here in the room. And the big part of that was actually designing the jigs that would give us the accuracy for making them. And we figured out actually that making them by hand is more accurate than a machine making them. So we nickname it space knitting, but it's using materials from the kite world, with obviously their, the Oxford Space Systems not wide knowledge of materials and what will work in space and what won't, because of course something's in a vacuum. If it's like a plastic ruler, it'll just expand like foam.
Oh, sure.
So you've got to be careful about what you put into
Right.
space and what glue you use, and how these are done. And of course, when you're designing something and when it's being tested and when it's actually going to go on a flight mission, you build 2 and they've got to be identical. So if there's a fault in one, you've got to build it into the second one. So they're identical twin, because what they'll do is test one to destruction on this. They've got
vibration and everything for the
vibration. Yeah, so it's like putting it through lots and lots of G's. So they'll do that one to make sure it's going to survive, and then the other one, which stays packaged up, goes on the flight. So yeah, and I think they've got the fastest prototyping timeline of any of the space industry companies. So I think 3 months, I
Wow.
think, is the timeline. Normally it takes 2
Yeah,
years.
that's
So they're very
by
competitive.
space standards, that's rapid.
It is,
It
yeah.
must have been kind of hectic.
Well, what? Nobody's doing anything
Oh
else.
yeah, I suppose that's true, right?
So,
Sitting about the house otherwise.
yeah.
Huh. So I guess we'll back up. So how did you? At some point, you're flying kites, you're competing. How did you transition from that to the events, to the career?
It's always gone. Well, I mean, I was going around the world with aircraft, and we were competing all over the place, like 22 events a year. It was a heavy schedule, and Jeremy in the team had a shop, and I made a few things for his shop, and people would come into there. I was friends with the Kite store in Covent Garden, with Andy King's shop, and Viv Walters and Sarah Kent worked there, and Viv was the head judge at a lot of these events, and Sarah was in another team and really good to hang out with. And people would come in, being in London, people are coming in looking for something alternative. And like one of my really good friends, Jane Ripley, she came in, this is how we met. She came into the Kite store. I was working there. That was one of my ambitions, as it were, as a teenager, to work at the Kite store. And she got this idea. She was designing for the Lord Mayor's show. And which is the oldest pageant in the world. For instance, it's 800 years old. It's where the name float comes from, because the boats on the river used to go down the Thames with the displays, with the event, displays on them. So that's where the word float comes from. Anyway, Jane has worked for the Lord Mayor's show for years and years. Anyway, she wanted these pieces of paper to fly off the back of a lorry. So these are big, sort of 2 meter, sort of 10-foot large pieces of what looked like paper. Didn't know how to do it, and then asked Andy behind the counter how does he know anybody who could, do this? It's kind of the right kind of fabric and the right kind of thing, but and he just pointed to me and just said, "You want to talk to Carl?" And I got my sketchbook out, and we've been friends ever since. So yeah, I got to do that, and then we got to do inflatables. And one year we did 14 floats in 1 year, and it was a yearly thing, and it's always been something that I've done in parallel with kites. So kites has never been in isolation, and then this has been something else, or what have you. So yeah, and then got asked to do a nightclub in Japan, as you do, through a friend, Ben, who's a photographer, still friends with. And the events company were let down by an inflatables company, and then Ben suggested I come in and and do these structures, and did those, and it worked. And then every 2 months we were going out to Japan filling the nightclub. And then on that flight, I actually got talking to John, the lighting designer, and he said, "Oh, you should talk to my colleague Paul." Turns out it's Paul Normandale, who is one of the biggest lighting designers in the world. And then pretty quickly I was, doing a set for Bjork. So it rolls, it's kind of
once you get into the
one thing leads to another
community, you're in the community.
Yeah, it's like without, you get talking to people, and it's kind of, you get suggested on.
I imagine that carries you pretty far, but then the Olympics.
And the Olympics comes through Take That with Misty Buckley and Kim Gavin, and that was a really good one. Misty found me to do some kites for Kim before that, and then then there's a sort of a few jobs that happen, and then Kim gets awarded the the contract to direct the closing ceremonies of the Olympics, and then it rolls from there.
It's amazing the things you have sort of found yourself in, just the range of projects from the Olympics and everything too. I mean, the Stranger Things stuff is remarkable. The pieces,
and that is a culmination of things like the hatchling, the dragon, the puppet, and the large scaleness of that, and things like the touring set pieces that I've done for bands where it's using materials in such a way that is very lightweight and fold up, pack down. I do that because that's how the whole thing folds up, just to give it away. But yeah, it's a large, audacious set piece that comes off the back of the London show, and that was a huge hit, real success. And
then they expanded when they moved to Broadway, and you did some new pieces for that.
Yeah, so Broadway was the idea. Let's look at it all again, and let's redo what we want to redo and keep what we want to keep. So a lot of the show is new for Broadway, and it's a lot better for it. So the London show is brilliant, but the Broadway show is a real sort of show-stopping show, and it's got some really big moments. And the Mind Flayer is probably the biggest show, the biggest part of the show. And
it's the size of the
trying to be humble when I say
massive. So
it is. It's big, and it's a big important story moment in the show as well. And it's a huge. And like the TV show, it's quite scary. And this is the moment where you are freaked out of your seat because this creature is above you, and it breaks the fourth wall basically. So it comes into the theatre, and it is, the Mind Flayer should be larger than a city, and it feels like that. And it's breathing, and it's mobile, and it's alive. So with the lighting, with the engineering, it's a phenomenal feat. And the automation company did an amazing job, and the scenic guys, and it won the special. Well, not just that, but the special effects team won the special Tony at the Tonys last year, quite rightly so. And I'm pleased that we all got to work together on that. So
I know because I remember you were back and forth during the build up because they were building it over here in Connecticut. I can only imagine too, because you're time zones away, you're coming back and forth, you're not here full time with them. Must have been a real challenge to sort of get it all just so, and then it has to all get broken down, brought down to New York, and loaded in.
Exactly. Yeah. And that happened before on the London show as well, where the first meeting with STS, who are the engineering company for the ship, which is the other set piece that I did design first. Not solely designed. I say that like it's just me, but it's a whole team of people. But that I was involved in, and the first meeting, there's Ralph sitting there, and he's like, "Oh, I know you. We worked together on Lord of the Rings back in 2004." So I just designed part of the Balrog for that, for the stage show for that. So again, it's based on that, and that's 20 years prior. So these relationships and these links, arc over time. And STS are in Holland, so there were quite a lot of flights over to Holland, there and back in a day, to see the prototype of the ship and get this all working, and lots of emails and Zoom calls and drawing on the screens in Zoom meetings and stuff, and very kind of like being in the studio together, but actually we learned a lot through COVID in terms of how we use this medium of the computer and having these meetings. So basically, we got to do that. So we got to kind of figure out the shorthand, if you like, for, how we communicate with all of this. And Ralph was amazing in terms of accommodating the fabric side of it, and obviously vice versa. So it really is an integrated part. So this ship appears in 1.6 seconds on stage, and it's the size of it is a battleship. It's the size of it. So that sets the tone of what's to come in the show, and then based on that, then that not just the set piece, but actually the way we worked then led to how we work in terms of from London to New York as well. And my counterpart, Ed Pierce in New York, who's a amazing set designer. He was effectively like the design director, pulling all the design aspects together for the show. So he really had his hands full. But I was dealing with just the Mind Flayer for New York. But again, he knows the ropes in New York, and then we got to figure out shorthand, and we have. long 3 hour meetings on a Friday, and stuff. And we got to share quite a lot and became friends. And, one thing leads to another, and you've got a kind of good working relationship. So by the time we actually get in the same room together, you've traveled a lot. You've gone through a lot together already, as it were, virtually. So yeah, there's a lot. I went out to New York quite a few times, to Connecticut, and also to the theatre as well. So yeah, there's a lot of backwards and forwards with that. Big budget show, needs a lot of
Yeah,
attention.
of course. So art installations, we were sort of talking about those too. So I think probably your most known art kite is the Serpent Deltas, and they're kind of
Okay.
a installation unto themselves. There, I mean, is it 10 yards of fabric, 20 yards of fabric, something like
18, so they're 15 meters long, so say 15 yards long, for argument's sake. And they're easy to handle one by itself with one person. Even a kid can fly it, for instance. But yeah, I do them now so they stack, and they're good on mass because there's just a lot of movement in the sky. It's kind of based on very simple ideas of color and
Right.
movement. So yeah, make it identifiable. And that ring emblem, logo, whatever you want to call it, I've been using for years. I've been playing around with this idea of orbits and eyes and circles and the circle of life and all of that stuff. It's whatever you want it to be, but it adds a highlight, as it were, a kind of focal point in the kite. And then you can play around with colours, so it's very adaptable. And like Nick James, bless him, sort of, he's famous for his angel kite, and he would make lots and lots of different variations of the same angel kite, but everyone's different, and you have a whole sort of plethora of family are kind of en masse, and that they're so active and work really well. So there's that in it as well. So one person can join in a mass fly. They're good by themselves. They're good on mass, and then this year I'm going to Notre Dame de Mont in France again. Went last year, going this year again, and with Alain, the organizer, he's like, "Do you want to do something bigger?" And so we're going to do a kilometre of kites along the shoreline for sunset there. So,
and when did the installations of the Delta start? Because you've been doing kind of the black and white Deltas and the black and white tails for a few years now.
yeah, and the black and white is kind of a good thing. It ties in with Frank Schwimmen, who I've been friends with for a very long time. We've got very similar sketchbooks, same age, grew up on Lego, all the same, influences, and he works a lot with black and white. He's very black and white in his color palette, if you like. He does use color, but it's a way of tying the two together. So it becomes what we called it for Chervia when we did it with Florian and Hans and Dave Ellison and Elian Schuler was call it the glitch mob. So basically everybody who's using similar kind of visual language stuff. So deltas, tails, black and white, bit of color, patchwork type stuff, so it's kind of everybody can just join in and it becomes this huge mob in the sky. The idea was from that, but the deltas, I've done them in all different colors, and I do them in colors for different, as people want them in their color scheme kind of thing. But yeah, I've done them, groups of batches of all white, all black, dark blues. But yeah, I think the black's the most striking because it's the most sort of like the Dementors from Harry Potter kind of thing.
They
the
are
most evocative. So yeah, and even in the darkness, they catch the light, which is beautiful. So you're seeing light movement.
I'll have to drop it in here somewhere. I have video from the light test at Hatchling where we used a couple of them.
Sure. Yeah.
And then they were dialing in the spots on them, and it's amazing because they kind of appear out of the darkness and they're almost white there because the spots were so powerful.
Yeah. Because you've got the sort of, they pick up the light, so and you've got the sheen on the fabric as well. So yeah.
So what other like installation stuff, art kite stuff have you done over the years? Because I know there's a few others.
Can I swear?
Yeah.
there's the big black meteor, which as a studio we designed for Heather and Ivan Morrison for an art installation in Blackpool. And also for the Haunch Venison Gallery in London. And the idea was based around a meteor, like a very heavy meteorite, black meteorite thing, which they were interested in. And very heavy in weight, very black, obviously no light. So the idea was to have this object that was looking in light, basically. It looked like it was a rock, but in the air. How do you get that to fly? And not as inflatable. So something that's got that faceted, geometric, crystalline feel to it. So Sasha Redding was working at the studio, and he spent a week, I think it was a week, maybe two, he'll probably correct me, but the working with different programs in the computer. Being an architect, he's working with programs that are beyond me, but figured out this one which was an emitter, so it spat out boxes and cubes, and basically was just freeze framing this kind of cloud of boxes, these squares, and just pressing pause, so just spitting out these as 3D CAD models, as it were. So changing the frequency, the kind of the sizes, the variation, the rotation, all of that, like you do in a you can change the brush pen in Procreate or Photoshop or whatever. And we picked a few and then whittled it down and then rationalized it and then just split one group almost down the middle and then made them, made it symmetrical. And that's what we did, and then took away the front and rear faces. And that's what you've got, is then kind of effectively a hollow structure that is a load of boxes that are have collided. What's the right English? That are smashed together, basically. Yeah. And, it looks like a crystal, and it's huge. It's 5 meters long, so 5 yards long, for instance. And, weighed 20 kilos, whatever the weight is. And, it was big. And Chris Goff and Sash worked really hard on getting these pieces made as a prototype, and basically we called it the toy box, or IKEA colours, in kind of yellow, red and blue. And they went out, flew them, each section flew by itself as a kind of compartmentalized kind of weird box thing, and then we just threaded them on a big spine, a bit like a bracelet, and flew the whole thing. And when it came to making it in black fabric, that was a real headspin, because it's black fabric on black with all of these shapes, and you don't know what it is until it's framed up. And of course, framing all of this was a nightmare as well. So every spar was labelled, and it was a big, big puzzle, basically. And then we took it to Bristol, to the Kite Festival, and Corey Jensen, bless him, was there with Andy King, bless him too, commentating, and we got to fly it. The wind wasn't quite strong enough, but we did a kind of a long launch and pulled it into the sky and whatnot. So, got photographs of it in the air. And then later in the bar, Corey sidled up and he went, "Carl, what the fuck are you doing?" in this really loud, booming voice that he had. Yeah, and what a compliment that is, because you've got somebody who's been around, seen it all, knows everything, and has the confidence just to come out and pat you on the back and just go, "What the fuck was that?" basically. And that's the thing, that, it's like to be able to stop people who, who know it all, not know it all in the cocky sense, but, who have been there and done that, have been in the game longer than you have, and you get to stop them, as it were, and they get to see that. That's a real privilege to kind of, have that moment where they're kind of going, "Oh, hello, sure. This is something different." And that led to Anoni and the Johnsons. Again, I mentioned Paul Normandale about Bjork. Paul got me in the meeting early on for Manchester International Festival with Anoni, and Anoni went, "I want that kind of thing," but in white. So we got to build that crystal cave of hers, which was just the most elegant show in the work, you could ever imagine, with her voice and her personality. And then that got picked up and by Klaus what's his name, the chief creator of MoMA, who commissioned it for New York for Radio City, and then we got to do it in Radio City and opera houses around the world, and it was magical. It was an incredible show. So yeah, it was amazing. Dream come true project where everybody involved with that. Chris Levine, Paul Norman Dale, Emma Whale, and Peter van der Veld, the production manager. Everybody was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So yeah.
That's amazing. So I guess most recent project then back in Sport Kites has been the Fulcrum.
Oh yeah, that little project.
Yeah.
It took 5 years to get into the air, literally. Well, actually, I did meet up with Andy Preston not long ago, and we were talking about when James and I, my brother and I, were staying at his. This is the Flexifoil, winding back to Flexifoil times, and this is Stranger Level 7 and Matrix times and stuff. And we were knocking ideas around, and I've got the sketchbook drawings of this idea of a 4-line sport kite with standoffs in sort of general outline, a bit more curvy, but that's 1998 or something. So this thing has been
years. Almost.
Has been sort of it's been a seed waiting to germinate for that long, and then talking to John Trenopole in Cervia in Italy in war way back in 2015, I think, maybe, and talking about that as a kind of, why don't we go down that route? And it was on the back of the Rev special edition kites as well, and they've did that, and then where do we go from there? And that was the conversation. It's like, how do we go further with this? And there's this idea, and it needs to be a sort of genuine, up to date in the sport kite that's in the 2000s with standoffs that
broader spectrum of
tricks so it's a 2-line kite with 4 lines. That's the idea. So it suits dual line flyers especially, and quad line flyers get hold of it, but the sort of established quad line flying sort of flyer social group, if you like, it's maybe not so much for them, but if they're up for moving their feet around and being more active, then that's funny. That's great.
You don't know this yet because of when we're recording this versus when the episodes will come out. The episode that I just recorded was with Brett Marshall, and Brett talks a lot about flying some of the test kites with John and actually trying to fly it as team kite with Sky Effects, and some of the trouble that they ran into. You said in a more social setting. It flies as a team kite, but it's a lot more work than the flat kites. Not necessarily in a bad way. Like, if you're willing to put in the work, it opens doors. But I think
that's what I'm saying. It's you like when you're learning to fly dual line. If you want to fly dual line in a new way, you've got to put the work in. So it's that. So find the door is there to be unlocked, basically. And James and I've figured out a routine that works really well. It takes practice. It's difficult. When's it going to be easy? But we did that with the Matrix as well. We took that kite and we made it, started unlocking new ways of doing team flying, because it could, as Nick always said in the team, Nick Boothby, this is back in the early days, like 94, and we had the white North Shore Radicals, which were just so nice. He's like, some team is going to come along and do an axle, like a team axle all together. Why don't we be that team? Like, don't wait for somebody else to do it and then follow on their footsteps. Like, just go out there and do it yourself. So so we did. So in Burke, we were the first team to axle all together, and you could hear people behind when we were practicing. You could hear people behind kind of go, "Ooh, here we go. There's a moment." This is starting to change.
I mean, it's funny you said the Matrix and the things that the progression there, because the first time I saw you fly was at Wildwood. You and James as Evolver, The Matrix, what was the
Brother's going to work it out.
where was it? Death
Oh,
in
is it Death in
Vegas.
Vegas?
Death in Vegas.
Yeah.
And none of us could figure out what you guys were up to because you're like half a field away from each other. You're like, we're still like in the US, we're all still shoulder to shoulder, maybe like a step apart if you're on equal length lines, but nobody's
Hmm.
staggering as far as you guys are. Nobody's as syncopated. It was a completely different look. It completely changed.
And this is, I think, something that is where like you're talking about the art kites and the installation stuff. I think this is where the two worlds start to
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
span or bridge between the two, because thinking about the flying field as a
Mm-hmm.
performance area,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're flying for an audience or if there's an arena there, it's a very privileged position to be asked to fly in that, and to honor the audience with intelligence and blah blah blah, so with all of that, bringing there's a chance to do something here, and a chance to not just do this what the status quo is, what everybody does, but bring new ideas, try it out. It might fail, it might work, and figuring it out. So thinking about how you view the win window, and for most people, for the judges, they're standing behind, but of course
You've told me this before.
they're not standing right
Yeah.
on your shoulder. So this is where the whole image that you're, as a flyer, you're creating starts to get distorted. So how do you then kind of go, well, let's lean into that. Let's distort the whole thing and let's just fly on top of each other. So basically we've got this idea of perspective. So wherever you are in the whole thing, it becomes a three-dimensional performance. So it's in the round, basically like theatre. So it doesn't matter where the audience is. So they get to see the shape in synchronicity. And it's, you might see it side by side, but to see it, layered, if you like Photoshop, or, layering up sheets kind of thing. It's that idea of depth. And you can do that, with 2, it's easy. With 4, it's even better. With 6, it starts to get really interesting as to what you can do.
You told me
so there's an idea
that you guys actually modeled stuff out for the perspective of the judges and the audience in 3 dimensions when you're doing scratch bunnies.
Yeah, so fast forward with scratch bunnies, so taking that further, so the idea of 3D, working that out, but then also then working out the architecture of the win window, the flying lines, the angles, the viewing angles, and how you fly the precision figures in 3 dimensions, so that the judges get the view that they should have of a flat piece. They can compare the flat piece of paper to this 3-dimensional world. Obviously, as a flyer, you're trying to do that, but what you need to do is give them the image of what they need to see. So rather than stubbornly we learnt that lesson a long time ago, rather than stubbornly trying to argue your point and kind of saying, no, you've got to stand where, you've got to stand and interpret what we do. Actually, as a flyer, you're in control. So you can interpret the image for what they need to see. So what they might have a diamond drawn out, but what you might be doing is flying a very acute diamond, and that might change through the win window, depending on the distance, the spacing, and the volume that you're taking up. So Sash being an architect, Chris Goff obviously in design college at the time, and coming out of that, now working as production designer, and myself and Dave and James and Robin and Richard appreciating all of this. But the 3 of us have the ability to draw in CAD, so we can actually share all of that information and really sort of interrogate the model of this, what the computer model is. So we worked out the precision figures in the computer, and that gave us a huge step up, but also gave us a lot more information about how we then operate as a team, especially a 6-person team. So we're able to work in quite what feels like a very restricted space of the arena, but able to work that out, and also being able to work out where we are at any one time and how much space we have, so that we don't cross a boundary, because we've all done that in competition. We've all got DQs at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how do you do that? And putting, not necessarily putting a marker down as to kind of where you need to be, but being able to have your awareness of your peripheral vision about where you are in the arena and how you lay that out. So you actually think about it as a circular arena.
Interesting.
And we can share the CAD model with you later.
So, kind of coming to about an hour here, so I think we'll get you on your way shortly here. But any upcoming projects you can share? Anything? I mean, you talked about the installation in France.
Yeah, the installation in France. I'm also doing some props for a very, very well-known band as well. They're going out on tour. I'm talking to somebody else about doing a US and European tour design as well. Whether that happens, I don't know. There's going to be quite a few kite festivals. We talked about Lytham St. Anne's
I will see you in
Portsmouth, Notre Dame, Vermont, and obviously Chervier as well. So that's going to be on the cards. Going to be at all of those, and looking to be having a foot in both the sport kite demo arena and also the single line stuff as well. So
busy as always.
Of course.
Where can people follow along?
So so best place to see what I'm doing most recently is Instagram, which is just Carl Robertshaw basically. So that's my sort of most sort of up to date sort of newsy stuff, as it were. But also at kite festivals, I've got my website, which is carlrobertshaw.com, so I can be contacted through that. That's a kind of like a formal gallery sort of thing for work with my CV. Instagram is probably the most sort of accessible. Sure. I'm not on Facebook. Never have been.
You're the only person I know that has never had.
Right.
I mean, outside of my grandparents and stuff.
Sure. I've got to keep it up.
Well, at this point, you're committed to it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if we missed. Oh, I guess we didn't really talk about the models, but do you want to talk about the models for a bit before we wrap up?
Yeah, I've always been into things that fly, and scale models is one of those things, and building scale models. So again, another Instagram, which is CR_scale models Instagram. That's something I've been doing for Tamiya Model Magazine, and it's been something that I've been doing for the past 20 years, but I did it as a kid as well, following my dad's footsteps. But it turns out Andy Preston is also
a little different subject matter.
Yeah, but he's doing, film replica movie models as well. But he's got a show coming up. I'm going to go and see him in March. It's sort of funny how people of a similar age have similar, hobbies and stuff. And, there are other kite flyers who are also into it as well, who, I see along the way too. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Carl, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you for tuning in for another one of these, for liking, following, subscribing, sharing, for being part of the community. And we will see you out there, Skyrider.